Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back from lunch. I hope everyone's tummies are full and we're ready for the rest of the afternoon hearing our last three talks. My name is Lori Sacrey, and I'm going to talk about autistic burnout. So autistic burnout has been used for a really long time by members of the autistic community to describe the negative impacts of living in a world set up for neurotypical people. If you go on Twitter, which is now called X, and you search for particular hashtags such as hashtag autistic burnout and hashtag actually autistic, you can see a long thread of people talking about feeling burnt out and asking for tips and talking about their symptoms of being burnt out and being autistic. And what's interesting about this is that although it's been talked about for a long time in social media and in the larger cultural world, it first appeared in literature in 2020, which is just 3 years ago, really. And when you think about that, that is such a remarkable thing that although it's been around for so long, it hasn't been talked about in the literature. And I'm using remarkable here, not in a positive way, more like how could it have only just first existed in 2020? And so I think what's really important about the articles that I'm going to highlight throughout this talk is that all of the information I'm going to present came from the papers that interviewed autistic people who have experience with autistic burnout. And so I've listed the first two here in the purple bubbles just to give you the titles of the articles in case you were interested in looking them up. So the first one came out in 2020. The second one came out in 2021, and there's been a couple that have followed since then. And when you look at the definitions of autistic burnout, they were a little bit different across papers, which is not too surprising because they were different populations of autistic individuals who were interviewed. But what they did agree on was that autistic burnout is a pervasive condition that is preceded by feeling exhausted from dealing with chronic life stress. So from living in a world that was designed for neurotypical people.
And so a key precondition for burnout, which is these feelings of exhaustion, was described by one of the participants as a video game energy bar. And I love metaphors, as you will see throughout my presentation. And so I really like this idea of having so much energy or having so many spoons, and then the things throughout the day just drain your energy from you, deplete your energy bar, take your spoons away from you. So as you can see, I am going to highlight some of these things using a series of pictures from Futurama. I chose Futurama for a couple of reasons. The first one is that it's my favorite show. It's amazing. If you haven't watched it, I would highly recommend it. Number two is that the voice actor who speaks for Fry and many of the other characters in Futurama, Billy West, is an autistic adult. And I think that's also really cool that he's in my favorite show. And also, I think there's just so much going on in this series. It's kind of like an autistic person because it's like it's going in burnout, it gets canceled, and then it comes back, and then it got canceled again, and then it came back again. So we're in the third iteration right now. So this show is just the thing that's never going to go away, and I'm super excited about that because I love it. So enough with that tangent. So first, I'm going to talk about the things that autistic folks identified as contributors to what they felt brought on their autistic burnout. And the first one, I think it's like a no-brainer. It's the lack of understanding of autism and across the institutions in society. So within the employment market, within the education system, sometimes within their own families, and then also within the healthcare system. And this can include access to diagnoses, for example. So not having a good understanding of autism, kind of like Dr. Zoidberg here, who clearly doesn't understand how you examine a brain, is almost like people going in and wanting treatment for some of the things that are challenging for them due to autism, and people just not really understanding what that might look like for them. Just an FYI, that is not how you look at the brain. The second one is the ableist expectations to conform. So a lot of people put the neurotypical world often puts a lot of pressure on the autistic person to conform to what they want them to do in society instead of providing accommodations. And each time an autistic person is expected to conform to these neurotypical standards, it takes those spoons away, right? It starts to drain that energy bar for them. So we don't all want to be like that. And then the third one on this list is disempowerment at work and at school. And so what this means is, so often in a workplace scenario, for example, there are ways to do a job, and then there are the cultural norms within that organization to do the job. And so an autistic person will do the job and get the job done, but because maybe it might have been a little bit different from the culture of the environment, they get gaslit into believing that they weren't doing their job properly, when in fact they totally were. And so just as when Fry was in the robot asylum and he was being told that he was a robot and he was saying, I'm not a robot, I'm not a robot, he was being gaslit into believing he was doing something wrong when he was actually totally correct. All right, the fourth one is masking. And I think, again, this will be no surprise. So masking is an attempt for autistic people kind of, I guess, to appear more neurotypical, for lack of a better words. So, going out in the world and kind of maybe masking or hiding those features that may make it more apparent to people that they might have autism. So just like Fry and Lily, who are dressed as robots because they're on a planet full of robots, and if you're a human on this planet, you get killed, they are masking their identity as human so that they can fit in, just like autistic people often have to mask their autistic traits to conform to the ableist society. And then, of course, another feature that contributes to autistic burnout is internalized stigma. And I think this quote by Bender really captures this so well. Internalized stigma is basically bullying yourself, right? It's telling yourself, why can't I do these things? Why is this so hard for me? I should be able to work a 9-to-5 job and have no problem. I should be able to do these things. I should be able to do these things. And that is really internalized stigma, is discriminating against yourself for having autism. So the outside world can bully you, but if you internalize ableism, you're also kind of bullying yourself. And the sixth one is experiencing sensory overload. So I think Patrina did a really good job this morning explaining how you can have different reactions to different types of sensory stimuli. So if you are an autistic person, you might experience some sensory stimuli very strongly and other stimuli maybe not so strong at all. And so if you're in an environment that is very loud, has a lot of strong smells, has a lot of visual things, the lights are really bright, the seats are uncomfortable, all of those things can contribute to making you feel tired, giving you low energy, and taking more ticks off of that energy bar. And so having to deal with constantly feeling these sensory experiences can be quite energy draining. So an eighth thing, which I think is important as well, sorry, a seventh thing, can't read numbers, is experiences of alexithymia, which is difficulty understanding one's emotions and feelings. And then interoception, which is a sensory system, which is about understanding the cues inside of your body. So for example, like feelings of being hungry, feelings of being tired, feelings of being thirsty. And a lot of autistic people struggle with these two things. And you can imagine if you can't understand your internal body cues, you might not realize that you're on the verge of being exhausted because you're not understanding your body is telling you that you're being exhausted. So like Fry here, where he's not sure if he's hungry or about to throw up, he's not understanding those internal body signals, which can cue him to, you're out of spoons, basically, buddy. And then, of course, and unsurprisingly, again, one of the core diagnostic features of autism is sometimes, these social communication differences. And so if you have misunderstandings, in social interactions, you can imagine how an autistic person might think about what they did wrong. I know I don't have autism, but I do have anxiety sometimes. And I know when I do something weird socially, I replay it in my mind a lot. And each time I do that, it just drains a little bit of my energy away. And so I can imagine something similar for an autistic person when I look at this particular contributor. A ninth one, of course, is work demands. So as I mentioned, the world is set up for neurotypical people. So if you have to work a 9-to-5 job where you're expected to show up on time, you're expected to work at a pace that your boss wants you to work at, and there are no accommodations in place or very few accommodations in place, that can take a lot of energy from you as well. And so I don't know how many spoons people start with, but already you can imagine we're on the 10th thing here. And I don't know if you start with 10 spoons and each one of these takes 1 spoon or multiple spoons, but you can see how adding all of these up over time can definitely drain that energy bar. And I think one of the things too that Patrina mentioned this morning about routines and predictability being also very important to the autistic phenotype. So if you have unexpected changes coming up in your personal life, at work, at school, wherever, all of those little unexpected changes can lead to feelings of being dysregulated and can take a lot of energy to manage. So now I want to move on to, so those are some of the things that the autistic adults that were interviewed mentioned to be what they thought contributed to their feelings of burnout. So now I want to talk about what they mentioned as being the features of the burnout once they're actually experiencing burnout. So the first one that came out was impairments in cognitive function. So when autistic adults were feeling that they were in burnout, they mentioned a lot about being confused more often, having difficulty concentrating, feeling dissociated, which is a term that I've heard quite often in my counseling practice, is just meaning like being shut down, shutting out all this sensory information, shutting out the world around them, and just taking in what's required to get through the day, because there's a lot going on and there's no energy really to deal with it, or very little energy, I should say. A second one is withdrawing. So withdrawing can occur in social relationships where people want to kind of not engage in social interactions anymore, want to be alone to kind of recharge that battery, because social interactions can be quite energy draining. And another way is work responsibility. So an individual who is in autistic burnout, one of the things that they may do is take a medical leave from work to recover from being burnt out. And so like the like the professor who I love, and when he's saying he doesn't want to live on this planet anymore, he is withdrawing from life because it's just not going the way that he wants it to go. A third feature is having increases in sensory sensitivity. So although the autistic people report having differences in how they perceive sensory information, when they're in autistic burnout, they reported that this sensory information is magnified. So things that were loud before are really loud now. Things that smelled bad before smell really bad now. And so when you're having these increases in sensory sensitivities, you can imagine it's much easier to become overstimulated and dysregulated. And because of that, autistic folks sometimes don't go to do these social interactions because it's just too much. There's too much noise, too many people, too many smells, too much of all the sensory information. A fourth feature of autistic burnout was increases in co-occurring conditions. So autism often is associated with a variety of co-occurring conditions like sleep problems, anxiety, stomach issues. And when a person is in autistic burnout, often they report, or they have reported in these articles, that these co-occurring conditions seem to be magnified during feelings of autistic burnout. So before, when they were having trouble sleeping, now while in burnout, they might actually be experiencing insomnia. Their anxiety features might be more magnified. They might be having a lot more stomach problems, and sometimes suicidal ideation appears during autistic burnout. A fifth feature, unsurprisingly, would be emotional dysregulation then. So in periods of autistic burnout, autistic folks might be more prone to crying. They might be more quick to anger or aggression. Or on the flip side, they might actually end up feeling more numb and shutting down, in that they're not letting in all of this information that is now all of a sudden becoming so much more loud, so much more magnified. The sixth feature is loss of skills. And I think executive functioning abilities, I won't spend a lot of time defining that because I think Katrina did a great job this morning. But basically things like planning and organization become a lot more challenging when you're in autistic burnout. Doing activities of daily living, like getting dressed in the morning, getting out of bed in the morning, brushing your teeth, those things that we do every day to, get through life, can become harder to do when you're in autistic burnout. And vocational skills, work skills, things that we do at work, like remembering how to copy and paste, maybe you forget how to do that when you're on autistic burnout. And so things that you could do before autistic burnout becomes more difficult or disappears when you're in autistic burnout. A seventh thing is self-image. So a lot of people in these papers reported that when they were experiencing periods of burnout, that they really compared their experience to the neurotypical experience and saying like, why is this so hard for me? Why? So a lot more of that kind of internalized ableism, kind of bullying themselves a lot more about, struggling with things that other people seem so easily to be able to do, which is quite unfair. And then, of course, there were just another category that the paper described as additional things. So unsurprisingly, autistic burnout is associated with low levels of energy and reduced ability to mask because they don't have the spoons or the energy to putting on that mask every day. And because of that, it looks like their autistic traits, which normally they may mask in public, seem more apparent. And that's just due to this burnout and this lack of energy and lack of sometimes maybe lack of spoons to be able to put that mask back on. And so there is some good news, everyone. So although there's a lot of doom and gloom here, there were a couple people that reported the positive benefits of burnout, as weird as that might sound, but I'm going to tell you what it is. So basically what it is a person who previously would have been undiagnosed as having autism, for example, will experience this period of burnout, and in trying to discover what's going on, will end up learning that they are autistic. And in that, they can learn, oh, I'm autistic. That's why I'm having, challenges in this area, or that's why I'm having challenges in that area. So some people reported that this period of burnout, which was really hard at the time, actually ended up answering a lot of questions they had about themselves, basically. And so now I just want to quickly end on some tips for recovery that were reported by the participants in these studies. So when they were asked about recovery, there was no real timeline. Some people said they were in burnout for days, some said weeks, some months, and very rarely a couple people reported that they had felt they were in burnout for years. When they were asked about how often they experience burnout, some people said that they've only had one period of burnout so far in their lives, and others say that they regularly experience burnout, and it's a part of their experience that they plan for and kind of accommodate. And so they were asked about what are some things, that you do to help you recover from feelings of burnout. So I'm going to give you a couple of those here. So it can be a slow process, but you can get down here where you've got a drained energy bar, taking these steps to get back up to refilling your energy bar and having a full drawer of spoons. So the first two really are interesting, I think, because they really tap into the second diagnostic criteria of autism. You want to look at it that way. So it's really tapping into that and engaging in things that are interesting for you. So it might be playing Dungeons and Dragons, like Bender here with the kids at the Planet Express. It might be listening to Taylor Swift. It might be whatever it is that you want it to be. Whatever your interest is, you spend time doing those things because that's energy restoring. Another thing is stimming. So stimming can look like anything and everything, really. It might be looking at a lava lamp moving. It might be looking at one of those bubble tubes. It might having soft fabrics that you rub against your face. It could be smelling things that you really like to smell. Just any kind of stimming that you find relaxing and soothing. People have reported to help them recover from feelings of burnout. The third and fourth ones really involve understanding. So spending some time learning about your physiological cues of autistic burnout. So if you're a type of person that experiences trouble with interoception, if you have someone in your life that you're comfortable with that can help cue you to differences. So they may be like, I've been noticing lately that you're being really tired, or you're kind of a little bit more cranky than usual. Should we talk about that a little bit, just to get some understanding of what your body is telling you and to give you cues that you may be headed to a period of autistic burnout. And then of course another one is autistic understanding. So joining communities of autistic folks where you can be accepted and people around you will understand your experience and may have tips and tricks that can help you navigate the world around you. A fifth one is social support. So although this includes allies like people, friends, family, people that are energy restoring to you. That's the key, not energy draining, but energy restoring. And this, of course, can include pets. And I apologize, I did not put a trigger warning on this because for those of you that know Futurama, teamwork can be a bit of a touchy subject. So just remember, this is about spending time with people and pets that restore your energy. 6 is really getting into those routines. So autistic folks often report in these papers that routines are really important. So making sure you're on a sleep schedule, making sure that you're eating regularly, and then really navigating your day. So if you have co-occurring conditions with which you take medication, perhaps putting a schedule in your phone, a series of alarms to remind you, oh, I have to take my medication this morning. Oh, I have to take my medication before bed. Oh, I should go eat something. So having an alarm or some kind of planner in your phone might be helpful for getting you back on a routine. And then taking time to unmask and just be authentically yourself, whatever that looks like for you. So just if you're alone and you just want to be yourself and do whatever it is you want to do to be authentically autistic and authentically yourself, do that, because that also is helpful with restoring energy. And then 8th and finally, I think it's good to be a little detective and spend some time just figuring out what works for you. So if you're the type of person that likes to stay up late and doesn't really like to have social interactions, maybe you need a job as a security guard at night where there's nobody around. So really looking at what is it that you find is draining your energy, and are there ways that you can accommodate that for yourself to have more success in life and to help mitigate some of those feelings of being burnt out. So just to summarize here, there are several contributors. So lack of a knowledge of autism, ableist expectations, gaslighting, or that disempowerment, masking, internalized stigma, sensory overload, interoceptive challenges, social challenges, and unexpected changes. Features of autistic burnout include challenges with cognitive functions, withdrawing socially and from work, increases in sensory sensitivity, increases in co-occurring conditions, emotional dysregulation, loss of skills of daily living and at work, self-images, and then other important things like energy and autistic traits. And finally, to boost recovery, autistic folks recommended engaging in your interest, stimming when you can, delving into really understanding your body and your cues, or having a partner help you with that, joining autistic communities, spending time with the social supports that restore your energy, re-engaging in your routines, taking time to unmask and be authentically you, and then figuring out what works for you. And that's everything for me. Thank you.